Have you ever sat down to work full of intention only to find your mind slipping away within minutes? You tell yourself this time will be different. You will focus. You will stay locked in. But then it happens again. A small distraction, a quick check, a thought that pulls you away, and before you realize it, your energy is gone, your time is wasted. And that quiet frustration starts to build inside you. It feels personal, like something is wrong with you, but it is not. What you are experiencing is not weakness, it is not a lack of discipline. It is the result of living in a world that constantly pulls your attention apart. Every notification, every scroll, every interruption is designed to break your focus. And over time, your mind adapts to this chaos. It becomes restless, it becomes scattered, it forgets how to stay still, and the cost is higher than you think. Because when your focus breaks, your confidence follows. You start doubting your ability to finish what you start. You begin to avoid difficult tasks. You tell yourself you will do it later. But later never comes. And slowly, your goals begin to feel further away, not because they are impossible, but because your attention is no longer under your control. This is the hidden war you are fighting every single day. Not a war of talent, not a war of intelligence, but a war for your attention. And here is the truth most people never realize. The quality of your life is directly tied to the quality of your focus. What you give your attention to shapes your reality. It defines your results. It builds your future. If your focus is weak, everything feels harder. But if your focus is strong, everything changes. Tasks become clearer. Decisions become easier. Progress becomes visible. And for the first time, you begin to feel in control again. That is what makes this so powerful. Because what you are about to discover is not just another productivity trick. It is a way to take your attention back. A method rooted in discipline, tested through time, and aligned with how your brain actually works. A method that does not rely on motivation, because motivation fades. A method that does not demand perfection, because perfection is impossible. Instead, it gives you something real. Something practical, something you can use immediately to rebuild your focus from the ground up. Imagine sitting down to work and actually staying there. No urge to escape, no constant distraction. Just clear, steady concentration. Imagine finishing what you start, consistently. Imagine feeling proud of how you use your time. That is the shift waiting for you. But it begins with one simple realization. Your focus is not broken. It has just never been trained. And once you train it, everything you thought was impossible starts to feel within reach. And once you accept that, something inside you begins to shift. The frustration starts to fade, and in its place comes a quiet sense of control. Because if your focus can be trained, then it can also be rebuilt. Stronger than before, sharper than ever. Long before modern life became loud and chaotic, there were people who understood this truth deeply. They knew that the mind, left untrained, would drift. They knew that attention was fragile. And they knew that mastery required structure, not emotion, so they did not wait to feel ready. They trained their focus with precision. They worked in controlled bursts. Not endlessly, not randomly, but with intention. For a short period, they gave everything. No distractions, no hesitation, just full presence. Then they stepped away. They allowed their mind to recover. And then they returned again and again, repeating the cycle until focus became natural. This was not about working harder. It was about working with the brain, not against it. Because your brain has limits, real limits. It cannot stay fully focused for hours without breaking down. When you push beyond that limit, your attention weakens. Your thinking slows, your effort becomes inefficient. You may still be sitting there, but your mind is no longer truly engaged. That is why you feel exhausted after trying to force long hours of focus. It is not because you are incapable. It is because you are fighting your own biology. But when you work in short, intense intervals, something powerful happens. Your brain understands the boundary. It knows the effort is temporary, and that changes everything. Resistance drops. Engagement rises. You stop seeing the task as endless and you start seeing it as achievable. This is where real focus begins. Not in forcing yourself to grind endlessly, but in committing fully for a limited time. Giving your complete attention, knowing there is a clear end point. That small shift removes fear. It removes overwhelm. It allows you to step in without hesitation. And once you start, momentum takes over. Your mind locks in. Distractions lose their power. time begins to move differently. Minutes feel meaningful, effort feels directed, you are no longer scattered, you are aligned. This is the state most people rarely experience, but once you feel it, you never forget it. Because in that state, you realize something important. You are capable of more than you believed. The problem was never your ability, it was your approach. When you respect the natural rhythm of focus and recovery, you stop burning out. You stop quitting halfway. You build consistency without draining yourself. And consistency is where transformation lives. Each focused interval becomes a promise kept to yourself. A small win, a signal that you are changing. That you are becoming someone who shows up, who commits, who follows through. And these small wins begin to stack. They build confidence. They build discipline. They build identity. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop relying on motivation. You create your own structure, and that structure carries you forward even when you do not feel like moving. That is the real power behind this method. It is not about time. It is about control. Control over your attention, control over your energy, control over your actions. And when you take control of those things, you take control of your direction. You stop drifting through your days, reacting to whatever pulls your attention next. Instead, you decide where your focus goes. You decide what matters. You decide who you are becoming. And that decision, repeated daily, begins to reshape your entire life. And yet, even with this understanding, there is a force inside you that pushes back. A quiet resistance that shows up the moment you try to focus. You feel it when you sit down and suddenly everything else seems more important. You feel it when your mind starts searching for an escape. That urge to check, to scroll, to delay. It feels automatic, almost like you have no control over it. But you do. What you are feeling is not weakness. It is your brain trying to protect you. Your mind is wired to avoid effort because effort costs energy. And from a survival perspective, conserving energy matters. That is why easy things feel good. That is why distractions feel rewarding. They give you quick satisfaction without demanding much in return. So when you choose to focus, you are going against that system. You are choosing discomfort. You are choosing effort. And your brain reacts by creating resistance. That resistance is the real challenge, not the task itself, not the difficulty of the work, but the moment right before you begin. The moment where your mind tries to pull you away. Most people lose right there. They interpret that resistance as a sign to stop, as proof that they are not ready. As evidence that they lack discipline, so they step back. They delay. They wait for motivation that never truly arrives. But what if that feeling meant something completely different? What if that resistance was actually a signal that you are about to grow? Because every time you sit with that discomfort instead of escaping it, you are training your brain. You are teaching it that effort is not a threat, that focus is safe, that you are in control. And this is where the power of short, defined focus intervals becomes undeniable. When your brain knows that the effort is limited, the resistance weakens. The task no longer feels endless. It becomes contained, manageable. You are not committing to hours of struggle. You are committing to a small window of effort. That changes the game. Suddenly, starting feels possible. The weight of the task shrinks. The fear fades. You step in not because it is easy, but because it is clear. And once you begin, something remarkable happens. Your brain adapts. The noise begins to settle. The urge to escape slowly fades. Your attention locks onto the task in front of you. You move from resistance into rhythm, from hesitation into action. This is the point most people never reach because they quit too early. They never give their mind the chance to settle into focus. They stay trapped in the cycle of starting and stopping, never pushing past the initial discomfort. But you are different now. You understand that the first few minutes are not meant to feel perfect. They are meant to feel challenging. That is the price of entry. That is the gateway to deep focus. And when you push through that gateway, even for a short period, you unlock something powerful. Momentum. Momentum changes everything. It carries you forward. It reduces the need for willpower. It makes the next step easier than the first. And once it builds, it becomes your greatest ally. You no longer rely on how you feel. You rely on what you started. That is how consistency is built. Not through motivation, but through understanding. Not through force, but through strategy. Each time you face that resistance and move through it, you become stronger. Not just mentally, but emotionally. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to see that you can handle discomfort, that you can stay when your mind tells you to leave. And that realization changes your relationship with effort forever. Because now, you are no longer avoiding the hard things. You are stepping into them, knowing they are the path forward. And as you begin to step into that space more often, something else starts to reveal itself. Time begins to change, not in the way the clock moves, but in the way you experience it. What once felt long and exhausting now feels sharp and intentional. What once slipped away unnoticed now feels structured and controlled. Because when you place a clear boundary around your time, your mind wakes up. Without limits, your brain drifts. It assumes there is always more time. It delays action. It stretches effort. It searches for comfort instead of completion. This is why entire days can disappear with so little to show for them. Not because you were incapable, but because there was no urgency guiding your attention. But the moment you define a limit, everything tightens. Your mind stops wandering. It stops negotiating. It understands that this moment matters, that it cannot be wasted. And that realization creates intensity. Not stress that breaks you, but pressure that sharpens you. You begin to act with purpose. Every second becomes intentional. Every movement becomes focused. You are no longer casually working. You are fully engaged. And that level of engagement changes the quality of everything you do. You think clearer, you decide faster, you execute better. This is the hidden power of boundaries. They remove the illusion that you have endless chances. They force you into the present, into the now. And in that space, your true ability begins to show. Because most people are not limited by skill. They are limited by hesitation. They wait too long. They overthink too much. They delay until the moment passes. But when time is defined, hesitation has no place to hide. You either act or you lose the opportunity. And when you choose to act repeatedly, something powerful begins to build. Trust, not in the outside world, but in yourself. You start to see that you can take a limited window and turn it into real progress. You begin to understand that you do not need perfect conditions. You do not need endless time. You only need commitment within the time you have. And that realization is freeing. It removes excuses. It removes doubt. It replaces them with action. You no longer say, "I will do it later," because later is no longer guaranteed. You bring your effort into the present moment where it belongs. And as you repeat this process, again and again, your identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who procrastinates. You stop labeling yourself as distracted. Instead, you become someone who moves, someone who executes, someone who respects time and uses it with intention. This is not a small change. This is a complete transformation in how you approach your life. Because once you understand the value of a single focused window, you begin to see how much is truly possible. You begin to realize that progress is not about doing everything at once. It is about doing the right thing fully in the moment you have, and that changes how you see your goals. They no longer feel overwhelming. They no longer feel distant. They become a series of focused actions, each one within your control. You stop fearing the size of the journey. You focus on the next window, and in doing that, you begin to build something most people never achieve. Consistency with purpose, not random effort, not occasional bursts of motivation. But steady, controlled progress that compounds over time. And once that begins, there is no going back. Because you are no longer chasing time, you are using it. And the moment you start using time with intention, you begin to understand something most people ignore. You cannot stay in that state forever. No matter how strong your discipline becomes, no matter how focused you feel, your mind will eventually slow down. Your energy will drop, your clarity will fade. And this is where most people make a critical mistake. They try to push through it. They believe that stopping means weakness. That resting means losing momentum. So they force themselves to continue, even when their focus is already breaking. And slowly, without realizing it, their quality drops. Their thinking becomes shallow. Their effort becomes mechanical. They are still working, but they are no longer progressing. This is how burnout begins. Not from working hard, but from working without awareness. Because real discipline is not about endless effort. It is about knowing when to step back. Knowing when your mind needs recovery. Knowing that rest is not the opposite of work, but a necessary part of it. When you respect that, everything changes. You stop treating breaks like a reward you have to earn. You start treating them like a tool that makes your next effort stronger. You begin to see rest as preparation, not escape. And when you step away at the right moment, something powerful happens. Your mind resets, the tension releases, the noise fades, your brain begins to process what you just did. It organizes information, it strengthens connections, it restores the energy you just spent. This is not passive, this is active recovery. And during that recovery, your subconscious continues working. It keeps solving, it keeps connecting ideas. That is why clarity often appears when you are not forcing it. That is why solutions come when you step back instead of pushing harder. Because your brain is designed to work in cycles, not in endless strain. When you align with that cycle, you unlock a different level of performance. You return to your work sharper, faster, more focused than before. What felt difficult earlier now feels manageable. What felt unclear now feels simple. This is the rhythm that builds true endurance, not by stretching your limits until they break, but by expanding them gradually. By giving your mind the chance to recover, then challenging it again, over and over until your capacity grows naturally. And as this rhythm becomes part of your routine, something deeper begins to form. You stop fearing exhaustion, you stop dreading long tasks, because you know you are not committing to endless effort. You are committing to controlled cycles, focus then recovery, effort then reset. That certainty changes how you approach everything. You become more willing to start, more willing to engage. Because you trust that you will not drain yourself completely. You trust the system you are building, and that trust removes resistance. It removes the fear of burnout. It removes the pressure to be perfect. It replaces it with a steady, sustainable way of working that you can repeat every single day. This is where consistency becomes effortless. Not because the work is easy, but because the structure supports you. Because you are no longer relying on willpower alone. You are working with a method that protects your energy and maximizes your focus. And over time, that creates something powerful. A system that does not collapse under pressure. A system that grows stronger with use. A system that allows you to keep going, not just for a day, but for weeks, months, and years. And that is where real transformation happens. Not in short bursts of intensity that fade away, but in sustained, controlled effort that builds over time. Because when you learn to balance focus with recovery, you are no longer just working harder. You are working smarter, and that changes everything. And when you begin to live inside that rhythm, something deeper starts to change within you. It is no longer just about getting work done. It is no longer just about managing time. It becomes something far more powerful. It becomes about who you are. Because every time you sit down and commit to a focused interval, you are not just completing a task. You are casting a vote for your future self. You are reinforcing a new identity, one built on action, not intention, one built on discipline, not emotion. At first, it feels like effort. You have to remind yourself, you have to push through resistance, you have to consciously choose focus over distraction. But with repetition, that effort begins to fade. What once felt unnatural starts to feel automatic, and that is where real transformation happens. Not in a single breakthrough moment, but in the quiet repetition of small, controlled actions. Again and again, until your behavior becomes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who struggles to focus. You stop carrying the label of being distracted or inconsistent. Instead, you begin to see proof, real proof. You sit down, you start, you finish, you follow through. And that proof rewires how you think about yourself. Confidence is no longer something you hope for. It becomes something you build, something you earn through repeated action. Every completed session becomes evidence. Evidence that you can trust yourself. Evidence that you are capable of more. And once that belief takes root, everything changes. You stop negotiating with your mind. You stop waiting for the perfect mood. You no longer ask yourself if you feel like doing the work, because that question loses its power. You act regardless. This is the difference between people who stay stuck and those who move forward. One group waits for motivation, the other creates structure, and structure wins every time. Because motivation is unstable, it comes and goes. It rises and falls with your emotions, but structure remains. It holds you steady when your feelings shift. It gives you direction when your mind becomes uncertain. When you rely on structure, you remove the need to decide over and over again. You eliminate the mental battle. You simply follow the system you have built, And that consistency creates momentum on a level most people never experience. Days stop feeling random, progress stops feeling accidental. You begin to see a pattern forming, a rhythm that carries you forward even on difficult days. You become someone who shows up, not occasionally, not when it feels easy, but consistently. And that consistency compounds. Small efforts turn into real results turn into confidence, confidence turns into belief, and belief fuels even greater action. This is how you break out of cycles that once held you back. This is how you move from hesitation to execution, from doubt to certainty. Because in the end, the method itself is simple. Short bursts of focus, clear boundaries, intentional rest, repeated daily, but the impact is not simple. It reshapes how you think, how you act, how you see yourself. You stop drifting through your days, reacting to distractions. You begin directing your attention with purpose. You become intentional with your time, your energy, your life. And that is the real reward, not just productivity, but control. Control over your actions, control over your direction, control over the person you are becoming. And once you experience that level of control, even for a moment, you realize something powerful. You were never stuck. You were just unfocused. And now you are no longer that person. And once you realize that, a new standard begins to form inside you. You no longer settle for scattered effort. You no longer accept days that slip away without meaning. Because now you have seen what it feels like to be in control, even for a short time. And that feeling becomes something you refuse to lose. You begin to approach your life differently. Not with pressure, but with precision. Not with overwhelm, but with clarity. You stop trying to do everything at once, and instead you focus on what matters right now. One interval, one commitment. One action executed with full presence. And that simplicity becomes your strength. Because complexity creates hesitation, it creates doubt. It makes you feel like you need the perfect plan before you begin. But this method removes that illusion. It brings everything down to a single decision. Will you focus, or will you drift? And each time you choose focus, you reinforce the person you are becoming. You begin to notice that distractions lose their grip on you. Not because they disappear, but because you stop giving them power. You become aware of them, but you do not follow them. Your attention becomes intentional, directed, controlled. This is mental discipline at its core, not forcing yourself to be perfect, but training yourself to return, again and again. No matter how many times your mind wanders, you bring it back. No frustration, no judgment, just control. And that repetition strengthens you in ways you cannot see immediately. Your patience grows, your tolerance for discomfort increases. Your ability to stay with difficult tasks becomes stronger. You begin to outlast the resistance that once controlled you. And this is where most people fall behind. They chase excitement. They chase quick results. They look for shortcuts that make things easier. But real growth is not found in what is easy. It is found in what you are willing to stay with when it becomes hard. This method teaches you to stay, to remain present when your mind wants to escape, to continue when the initial energy fades, to commit even when it is uncomfortable. And that ability separates you from who you used to be. Because now you are not reacting to your feelings. You are guiding them. You are no longer waiting to feel ready. You are deciding to act and letting your feelings catch up later. That is power. And with that power comes a new level of responsibility. Because once you know how to focus, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer say you do not have time. You can no longer say you cannot do it. Now you know that progress is built in small, controlled moments. That change is created through repetition, not intensity. That your future is shaped by what you choose to focus on today. And that truth is both challenging and freeing. Challenging because it demands action, freeing because it puts control back in your hands. You begin to see your time differently. Not as something that slips away, but as something you can shape, something you can direct, something you can use to build the life you once thought was out of reach. And it all comes back to a simple practice. Sit down, remove distractions, commit fully for a short period, rest with intention, repeat, again and again. Until it is no longer something you try to do, but something you simply do. Until focus is no longer a struggle, but a part of who you are. And when that happens, everything changes. Because you are no longer chasing your goals. You are becoming the person capable of achieving them.